Close your eyes and imagine the ancient land of Mesopotamia, the cradle of civilization, where two great rivers carved life into the earth. Here rose Babylon, a city of gardens, walls, and sacred towers that reached toward the heavens. Among its wonders stood a monument that would echo across millennia, the legendary Tower of Babel. Was it myth or memory? A story meant to warn against pride, or the record of a monument so vast it touched the imagination of all who saw it? Could it have been more than stone? Perhaps an ancient technology, a cosmic bridge between earth and sky? Tonight, we journey into the mystery of Babel, exploring its history, its myth, and its enduring place in the human spirit. Let the quiet rhythm of the past guide you as we walk slowly among ruins and stories, listening to voices scattered yet never silenced. The land of Mesopotamia has long been called the cradle of civilization. Between the mighty rivers of the Tigris and Euphrates, human beings learned to build cities, carve symbols into clay, and organize the rhythms of life under the stars. Among these ancient peoples were the Babylonians, heirs to the Sumerians and Akkadians, dreamers of the heavens who gazed upon the skies with both fear and reverence. Babylon itself rose not only as a city of bricks and canals, but as a symbol of humanity's unrelenting desire to reach upward, to bridge the gap between the earth and the divine. At the center of this story stands one of the most enduring legends in human history, the Tower of Babel. The biblical tale is well known. Humanity, united under one tongue, decided to build a tower whose top would reach the heavens. The higher they built, the greater their ambition became, until the divine grew displeased. According to Scripture, God descended, confounded their speech, and scattered them across the world. This is the origin, we are told, of the many languages of humankind. Yet, like all stories carried across millennia, the Tower of Babel is not just a single narrative. It is a mirror reflecting many layers of memory, history, and myth. When scholars and explorers turned their attention to the ruins of Mesopotamia in the 19th century, they discovered the remnants of colossal stepped structures, ziggurats, built of mud brick and rising tier upon tier toward the skies. These were not simple towers, but architectural marvels, symbolic mountains meant to anchor heaven and earth together. The most famous of these was the ziggurat of Babylon itself, Etemenanki, whose name means the foundation of heaven and earth. This structure, some say, may have been the true inspiration for the biblical Tower of Babel. Imagine the sight: a monumental pyramid of bricks gleaming in the sun, rising some 90 meters high, dominating the flat landscape of the Mesopotamian plains. Pilgrims and priests climbed its stairways to reach shrines at the summit, where offerings were made to Marduk, the great god of Babylon. To the people who lived in its shadow, it must have seemed like a ladder into the realm of the divine. Yet to those who told the story centuries later, it may have appeared as something even more mysterious, a challenge to heaven itself. The legend of Babel is not only about architecture, it is also about human unity and human pride, about the tension between cooperation and divine boundary. Why should the gods fear humanity united? Why should speech itself be fractured as punishment? These questions have haunted generations of thinkers. Some suggest the story was a metaphor for imperial power, that Babylon, with its towering ziggurat, symbolized human arrogance in the eyes of Israelite scribes. Others, however, see in the tale a hint of something deeper, the memory of forgotten technologies, or cosmic ambitions that stretch far beyond the concerns of ordinary empires. When we look at the Tower of Babel, we are drawn into more than just a myth. We are invited to contemplate humanity's earliest attempts to harness knowledge, to shape matter and time, to build structures that echo the very cosmos. For the Babylonians, architecture was not only a matter of clay and stone. It was a language that spoke to the gods. Each ziggurat was a cosmic diagram, a stairway aligning the heavens with the earth. Perhaps then, the Tower of Babel was never about reaching physical height alone. Perhaps it was about creating a resonance, a connection, a conduit between the mortal and the eternal. The Babylonians inherited a long tradition of sacred construction. Their ancestors, the Sumerians, were among the first to build temples that rose above the flat plains, imitating mountains in lands where no mountains existed. These structures were layered in stages, each level painted in different colors, representing the realms of the cosmos. Black for the underworld, red for the human plane, blue for the heavens. To ascend such a ziggurat was to journey through creation itself. By the time Babylon emerged as a great power, this tradition had matured into breathtaking feats of engineering. Etemenanki, the ziggurat most often associated with the Tower of Babel, was said to have 7 terraces, each narrowing as it rose, culminating in a temple dedicated to Marduk. The descriptions passed down through history paint a structure so vast and so commanding that even centuries after it had fallen into ruin, its memory still loomed over travelers and scribes. The Greek historian Herodotus, visiting Mesopotamia in the 5th century BCE, described a towering structure with winding stairs leading to the heavens. Though scholars debate whether he truly saw Etemenanki or relied on second-hand accounts, still, his words reinforce the image of a tower unmatched in the ancient world. The building of such a monument was not only a physical endeavor, but a spiritual one. Thousands of laborers shaped sun-dried bricks, inscribed with the name of the king who sponsored the construction. These bricks were bound together with bitumen, a natural tar that held firm against time. Layer by layer, terrace by terrace, the tower rose. Priests ascended its stairs not merely to look out upon the city, but to draw nearer to the gods. From its heights, one could see the sprawling canals, gardens, and walls of Babylon, a city that ancient writers called one of the wonders of the world. The biblical story, however, casts this monument in a different light. In the book of Genesis, the builders of the tower are not portrayed as pious devotees, but as arrogant mortals seeking to rival the divine. "Let us make a name for ourselves," they declare, fearful of being scattered across the earth. This framing suggests that the story was less about architecture and more about the dangers of ambition. To the scribes who preserved the tale, unity without humility was a threat. For what might humanity accomplish if left unchecked? Yet beneath this moral warning lies a tantalizing possibility. Could the Tower of Babel represent more than just human pride? Some modern interpreters speculate that it hints at lost knowledge, technologies so advanced that they blurred the line between the human and the divine. The scattering of languages, in this view, becomes not only a punishment, but a safeguard, a way to ensure that no single group could recover the secrets of the ancients too easily. It is a provocative idea, one that merges archaeology with myth, and it has fueled countless theories about ancient civilizations. Whether myth or metaphor, the Tower of Babel remains a puzzle. The ruins of Etemenanki lie silent, reduced to little more than foundations. But in its time, It was a marvel, a stairway of brick that captured both the awe of its builders and the suspicion of later generations. To walk among its ruins today is to step into a space where legend and reality intertwine, where the boundaries between faith, history, and mystery dissolve into the quiet dust of Mesopotamia. Babylon itself was not just a city of bricks, but of symbols. Its walls were said to be so wide that chariots could race upon them, its gates adorned with sacred lions and dragons, and its streets aligned with ceremonial processions that celebrated the divine. Within this grand city, the ziggurat was more than a monument. It was the axis around which the spiritual and political life revolved. To climb its steps was to ascend not only physically but ritually, each level marking a transition from the mundane to the sacred. At its summit, in the small temple dedicated to Marduk, priests performed rituals meant to sustain the order of the cosmos. But the Tower of Babel story suggests something unsettling. Instead of being a bridge between earth and heaven, the tower became a boundary too close to crossing. The divine response was not approval but disruption, not blessing but fragmentation. To those who preserved this tale, the tower was no longer a sacred link, but a cautionary warning about reaching too far. This tension between sacred aspiration and forbidden ambition is what gives the Babel story its enduring power. In the Jewish, Christian, and Islamic traditions, Babel represents the danger of pride, the folly of mortals attempting to rival the Creator. Yet in Mesopotamian tradition, towers such as Etemenanki were not acts of rebellion, but acts of devotion. This contrast raises questions. Was the biblical account a reinterpretation, perhaps even a critique, of Babylonian religion? After all, the Israelites experienced exile in Babylon during the 6th century BCE, a time when the city and its ziggurat would have towered above them as overwhelming symbols of foreign power. To describe Babylon's great monument as an arrogant tower cursed by God would have been a way to diminish its authority in the eyes of those forced to live beneath its shadow. And yet, as we peel back the layers of this story, another possibility emerges. What if the Tower of Babel was remembered in such vivid detail, not merely because of its size, but because it represented something extraordinary? Ancient people often described technology in the only language they knew, through myth, metaphor, and divine imagery. Could it be that the Tower of Babel, and the ziggurats like it, contained elements of ancient engineering or astronomical alignment that still puzzle us today? The Babylonians were masters of the sky. They mapped the paths of planets, recorded eclipses, and devised complex mathematical systems to predict celestial cycles. Their temples were not just shrines, they were observatories. The very design of ziggurats may have functioned as platforms for stargazing, each level bringing priests closer to the heavens they studied. If the Tower of Babel was such a structure, then its purpose may have been more scientific than we often imagine. A laboratory of the cosmos disguised as a temple. Thus, the story of Babel may preserve not only a moral lesson, but also a faint memory of a time when humans sought to unite the sciences of heaven and the rituals of earth. The scattering of languages might then symbolize the fragmentation of knowledge itself, once shared, now divided, scattered across cultures, waiting to be pieced together again. When we imagine the Tower of Babel as both myth and monument, we begin to see how history and legend intertwine. Archaeologists who excavated Babylon uncovered layers of ruins, bricks stamped with the names of kings, and traces of the grand ziggurat that once stood there. Nebuchadnezzar II, the great Babylonian ruler of the 6th century BCE, claimed to have rebuilt Etemenanki, restoring its terraces to their original glory. In inscriptions, he boasted of raising the tower as high as the heavens. These words echo uncannily with the biblical phrasing, suggesting that even in his time, the tower carried cosmic significance. But if Etemenanki was the inspiration for the Tower of Babel, what became of it? Historical records hint that the structure fell into disrepair more than once. Earthquakes and invasions took their toll. By the time of Alexander the Great, when he marched into Babylon in 331 BCE, the tower was already crumbling. Alexander reportedly ordered its reconstruction, intending to restore it as a monument to his empire. But his untimely death left the project unfinished. The tower, once the heart of Babylon, faded into ruin, and in time, into myth. Yet myths are rarely just fabrications. They are memories, encoded in story. The Tower of Babel is not only remembered in scripture, it appears in echoes across cultures. In Mesopotamian tradition, temples called houses of the foundation connected heaven and earth. In Mesoamerica, the stepped pyramids of the Maya and Aztecs bore striking resemblance to ziggurats, leading some to wonder whether there was a shared memory of an ancient global tradition of sacred towers. In each case, the structures served as cosmic mountains, places where the earthly and the divine could meet. The Tower of Babel, then, may be one expression of a universal impulse, the desire to rise, to connect, to transcend. Yet, the biblical account reminds us that this desire can also be perilous. To build a stairway to heaven without humility invites ruin. Perhaps this is why the story has endured for millennia, because it touches something deeply human. We dream of ascent, of knowledge, of unity, but we fear the consequences of overreaching. Still, one cannot help but wonder, was there something more? Some researchers have speculated that ziggurats, including the Tower of Babel, may have acted as more than temples or observatories. Could they have been centers of energy designed to harness natural forces? The alignment of their terraces with celestial bodies suggests more than coincidence. Their very shape, broad at the base and narrowing to the heavens, resembles devices of resonance and power. Though such ideas remain speculative, they remind us that ancient structures often contain layers of meaning we have yet to fully unravel. As the ruins of Babylon lie quiet under desert sands, the Tower of Babel still rises in imagination, not of bricks and mortar, but of questions and mysteries. Was it myth? Was it memory? Or was it something far stranger, an echo of an ancient technology long forgotten? The answers remain hidden, scattered like the languages of the earth, waiting for us to listen. The Babylonians themselves never saw their ziggurats as rebellions against the gods. To them, these towers were sacred gifts, built to honor the deities who ruled the cosmos. Every brick bore the king's seal, not out of vanity alone, but to inscribe the ruler's devotion into the very foundation of the structure. The construction was an act of ritual as much as engineering. Workers chanted prayers as they laid each level. Priests sprinkled consecrated water to bind the earth to the heavens, and offerings were buried within the foundations to strengthen the tower's spirit. Yet, when viewed through the eyes of the Israelites who lived in exile beneath Babylon's shadow, the towering ziggurat may have appeared less holy and more threatening. To them, this immense monument was not a ladder to heaven but a symbol of oppression, a display of power by a foreign empire that had conquered their land. The retelling of the Tower of Babel as a story of divine punishment may have served as comfort, a reminder that no empire, no matter how mighty, could rise unchecked without consequence. Thus, what for the Babylonians was sacred devotion became, in another tradition, a cautionary tale. But the deeper question lingers. Why did this particular tower capture so much imagination? Across countless cultures, myths describe great towers, pyramids, or mountains that connect heaven and earth. The Maya of Central America built step pyramids aligned with the stars. The Egyptians raised monumental pyramids that pointed skyward. Even in distant legends of Polynesia and Africa, we find stories of ladders to the heavens, often broken or destroyed after humanity's pride became too great. It is as though there exists a universal memory, scattered among the people of the earth, of a time when humanity tried to reach beyond its place. Could the Tower of Babel be part of this deeper memory? If so, what was it that ancient people sought? Was it communion with the gods? Or perhaps something more tangible? A lost science that once bridged worlds? The Babylonians were not strangers to advanced knowledge. Their astronomical records, preserved on clay tablets, remain astonishingly accurate. They could predict eclipses, trace the paths of Venus and Jupiter, and measure time with great precision. Their mathematics was intricate, their calendar refined, and their ability to calculate distances and angles suggests a sophistication far beyond what we often imagine for the ancient world. If the ziggurats were aligned with the stars, if their terraces marked cosmic stages, then perhaps the Tower of Babel was as much an instrument as a monument. Some researchers have wondered whether its step design, narrowing toward the summit, could have been used to focus sound, light, or energy. Though mainstream archaeology is cautious with such interpretations, the possibility remains intriguing. In myth, the Tower of Babel became a threat to heaven itself. And perhaps this was not just symbolic. If humanity had discovered ways to reach higher, to resonate with forces beyond, then the gods, or the memory of forces greater than ourselves, may indeed have seemed wary. Thus, the tale of Babel endures not only because it warns of pride, but because it whispers of forgotten wonders. It speaks of unity shattered, of knowledge dispersed, of something once whole, now broken into fragments across the languages of humankind. The scattering of languages at Babel is itself one of the most haunting elements of the story. In a single moment, according to the tale, humanity's shared voice was divided into many tongues, each group departing in confusion and frustration. From this moment, cultures split, civilizations diverged, and communication fractured. Whether taken literally or symbolically, the scattering of languages resonates as a myth about division, about the end of a golden age when humanity spoke as one. But what if this scattering was more than metaphor? Linguists trace the evolution of language through families, branching and diverging over millennia. Yet myths often compress vast ages into single moments. The Tower of Babel may have encoded an ancient memory of cultural dispersion, of tribes and peoples spreading outward from a common center. Archaeology tells us that Mesopotamia was indeed a cradle of migration, a place where peoples met, mixed, and then moved outward. Could the story of Babel reflect this great movement, remembered as a sudden event, rather than a slow unfolding. Another layer to consider is knowledge itself. When people scatter, they carry fragments of their learning. The art of building, the craft of metal, the secrets of the stars, all of these can be dispersed, half forgotten, transformed into myth. Perhaps the Babel story is not only about language, but about the loss of unified wisdom. Imagine a time when humanity's knowledge was concentrated, shared among all. Then, after dispersion, each culture preserved a portion. The Egyptians their geometry, the Babylonians their astronomy, the Greeks their philosophy, the Maya their calendars. In this light, Babel becomes not just the origin of languages, but the scattering of science, a dispersal of a once greater whole. The ruins of Babylon itself remind us of this scattering. The city that was once the center of the world now lies silent beneath layers of dust, its bricks plundered, its gardens vanished. Only fragments remain, carried into museums, studied by scholars, whispered about in myths. The Tower of Babel, whether real or allegorical, now exists only as scattered stories across cultures and scriptures. Just as the people once dispersed, so too did the memory of their great monument. Yet, the fascination endures. Some see in Babel an echo of lost technology, a civilization that reached heights too quickly and was undone. Others see a parable about unity and humility, a reminder that cooperation without wisdom can lead to ruin. And still others see a puzzle, an unfinished riddle from the dawn of history, inviting us to piece together the scattered fragments. In the quiet of night, when one imagines the flicker of torches climbing the terraces of Etemenanki, the chants of priests rising toward the stars, and the vast city stretching out beneath the tower's shadow, the legend feels alive again. Babel is not only a place in the past, it is a symbol that still calls to us, whispering of the heights we once dreamed of, and of the mysteries we still long to uncover. At dawn, the city stirred like a living instrument, tap canals whispering, date palms rustling, distant footsteps gathering along the processional way. On festival mornings, the king himself would walk beneath lapis beasts and lion guardians, pass through gates bright with glazed brick, and approach the temple precinct as a humble petitioner. Within the sanctuary, a high priest would take the royal insignia, speak sacred words, and even strike the king lightly across the cheek so that tears might rise, not as humiliation, but as proof that the ruler still feared the gods. Only then could he be restored to honor. Only then could the order of heaven and earth be renewed. It is a scene that folds strangely into the Babel story, a reminder that in Babylon, the ritual antidote to pride was built into the year itself. Outside, the tower waited in the morning light, the terraces layered like steps of a cosmic ladder, each platform a stage on which the city could breathe and rise. Some traditions speak of 7 tiers, a number that glimmers with meaning. 7 classical wanderers across the sky. 7 days that map their motions. 7 metals known to the ancient craftsmen. To climb such a stair was to pass the spheres, to move from the dust of the marketplace to the quiet thin air, where thought itself grows clear. Priests ascending with offerings timed their steps to hymns that kept the beat of the heavens, voices lifting, drums answering with a heart-like pulse that made the brick seem to vibrate. The materials were ordinary and wondrous at once. The mud turned to brick by the sun, reed mats woven into layers to bind the courses, bitumen seeping like dark glue between the joints. In a land of rivers, bitumen was blessing and mystery. and water could not eat through it. Time slid off it, and when fire kissed it, the scent rose like a memory of the earth's hidden depths. Some who study such things imagine a practical genius beneath the sacred skin, reed and brick creating a composite strength, the stepped geometry shedding weight and wind, the terraces channeling air so that breezes hummed around corners and stairwells. If the tower sang, it would have been with the city's own breath, a low resonance that wrapped prayer and engineering into one. On the upper platforms, shallow basins could hold water for ritual washing, or become mirrors for the sky. Imagine a night when the basin lies still and the stars fall into it, bright points arranged on black water like a tablet of wet clay. A priest bends and reads the surface as he would a text, constellations shifting in their season, bright omens crossing the quiet. From here, the horizon is a ruler drawn against darkness. Eclipses anticipated, risings counted, the calendar corrected with small, precise vows. To call such a place a tower is to miss the nuance. It is a lens, a stage, a metronome set to the pulse of the world. In the streets below, languages mingled like spices in a market bowl. Akkadian words threaded with Sumerian ritual phrases. Traders throwing Aramaic into the mix as caravans arrived from far edges of the earth. Unity was never simple. Even in Babylon's height, the city glowed with differences, with accents, weights, measures, gods with overlapping duties and shared temples. Perhaps the fear behind the Babel tale is not that humans were too united, but that they tried to force a single voice upon a world that thrives on harmony rather than unison. Music knows this. A chord lives because its notes are many. So the tower rose, and with it rose a question that never tires. How high may we build before height becomes forgetting, before we lose the ground from which meaning grows? The rituals tried to answer by teaching ascent that bowed at every landing, knowledge that paused to wash its hands, to lift its eyes, to confess that wisdom does not end at the edge of calculation. In those pauses, one hears a different kind of technology, a craft of the soul, careful, rhythmic, designed to keep human hearts aligned with the sky they long to reach. In the cool rooms of the scribal houses, the city kept its memory, clay tablets stacked like quiet libraries, each one impressed with wedges of light and shadow. Students practiced the signs until they flowed like water, lists of words, lists of stars, lists of offerings and days. Out of this discipline rose a way of measuring the world that still beats inside ours. The circle divided into 360, the hour into 60, the minute into 60 again. Base 60 moved through the hands of Babylon like a secret rhythm, a lattice on which time and distance could be hung with elegance. The tower, counted by steps and terraces, lived within that lattice, a geometry that touched the planets, with numbers that breathe inside our clocks even now. To the priests who read the sky, the heavens were a book and a barometer, omens traced not as superstition only, but as careful sequences gathered across generations. Eclipses entered the record with dates and consequences. The king's vow here, a flood there, a favorable harvest marked by a certain rising before dawn. A long series of texts laid these patterns out like constellations on clay, so that a watcher on the terrace could stand between stars and city and feel the two turn together. Myth, in this world, was the cloth that wrapped data, keeping it warm, keeping it human, ensuring that knowledge served meaning rather than devouring it. If there was an ancient technology hidden in the tower, perhaps it was not a machine of metal but a choreography, a reliable way to synchronize a people with the heavens and with one another. Signals lit on high places, the dew fires, flags, the gleam of polished metal in the slanting sun could travel faster than feet along the canals. A calendar announced by festival and procession moved harvests and taxes and pilgrimages with the same pulse. Music and measure, brick and bitumen, prayer and prediction together, they formed a system that made the city breathe in time. Yet, no system lives forever. Rivers shift their beds, canals silt, fields tire, and are renewed or left to rest. Empires pass as clouds do, leaving bright rain in some eras and shadow in others. The tower that had gathered so many meanings endured as long as hands could repair it, as long as kings could summon labor and love to its flanks. Then invaders came, or coffers thinned, or the will to maintain greatness simply softened, and the high places began to crumble. Bricks were borrowed for humbler walls, reed mats withered, terraces slumped into slopes that the desert learned to keep. The story did not fade, and it traveled. Exiles carried it in their mouths, set it by lamplight before their children, let it glow as warning and comfort in a strange land. Scribes distilled it into a parable of speech undone, a world once whole, now speaking in many voices. Centuries later, painters would imagine cranes and crowds beneath a spiraling colossus, builders scrambling, while a storm of syllables rained confusion. Scholars would dig, brush by brush, and lift stamped bricks that whispered royal names, fragments of a great base, a footprint of a vanished stair. In museums, the tablets would wake again, neat wedges revealing calendars and planets, contracts and hymns, domestic lists and dreams of order. What remains, when the tower itself is gone, is a habit of looking up and listening. The night explains itself slowly to those who wait. Constellations turning like gentle machinery, planets riding deliberate loops, the moon's scarred lantern describing the month. We still keep Babylon's numbers in our wrists and in the faces of our clocks. We still trust terraces of learning, rising level by level, each one built on the patience of the last. And we still tell the story of a time when speech was won, not because we pine for uniformity, but because we remember the sweetness of understanding before the world splintered into competing scripts. In that remembering, the tower rises again within us, not in brick, but in intention. A structure of listening built upward from silence. A ziggurat of small fidelities to truth and to wonder. Such a tower reaches differently. It does not claw the sky so much as invite it. A gentle meeting place where knowledge can kneel and stand in the same breath. And if there is a lesson hidden in the old foundations, it may be this: that the most enduring ascent is the one that leaves room for many voices to sing, many measures to count, many ways for the human heart to look up and be at home. The ruins of Babylon today are quiet. The low mounds beneath the Iraqi sun, fragments of walls, faint outlines of once grand courtyards. Yet when we close our eyes, the silence stirs with echoes. Footsteps climbing terraces, chants drifting across plazas, the hum of a city that believed itself to be the center of the world. To walk among the dust is to feel the weight of a memory too vast to vanish. Each broken brick, whispers of a tower that once reached upward, a story that would not die even when the structure itself was reduced to rubble. Travelers in the centuries after Babylon's fall often spoke of a mysterious heap of ruins, a mound so massive that it seemed unnatural, as though it had once been the base of something greater. Some claimed it was haunted, others that it contained secrets buried beneath its layers. Local traditions called it Burz Nimrod, linking it to Nimrod, the mighty hunter of the Bible who was sometimes imagined as the builder of Babel. These associations show how the legend of the tower fused with geography, myth, and memory, a tale that bent and reshaped itself as it moved through time. The name Nimrod itself carries a shadow. In Hebrew tradition, he is portrayed as a rebellious figure, a king who sought power and defiance against heaven. Later interpreters wove him tightly with Babel, suggesting he urged humanity to build the tower in arrogance. But in Mesopotamian lore, kings were often celebrated as builders, as those who raised temples to honor the gods. What is portrayed as rebellion in one tradition may simply have been devotion in another. Thus, Nimrod stands at a crossroads between cultures, where a symbol of how perspective can change the meaning of memory. When archaeologists began to excavate Babylon in earnest during the 19th century, they found not only the remains of palaces and walls, but the foundations of a monumental tower. Layers of mud bricks stretched outward like the footprint of a vanished mountain. Inscriptions confirmed what ancient writers had hinted at. Nebuchadnezzar II had indeed rebuilt the great ziggurat of Babylon, raising it as high as the heavens. Whether he succeeded fully is uncertain, but the ambition was real, stamped into every brick. The image of a stairway to heaven, preserved across millennia, invites us to imagine more than stone. Was this tower simply a monument of faith, or was it also an attempt to replicate the cosmos in clay, to embody in earth the structure of the heavens? If each terrace represented a sphere, if each color and direction aligned with planets and stars, then the tower was not only architecture, it was cosmology made visible. To climb it was to ascend the universe itself, one level at a time. Such ideas remind us that ancient myths were never merely fanciful tales. They were vehicles of knowledge, encoded in story, preserved in symbol, told and retold until their meanings blurred yet endured. The Tower of Babel may be the most famous example of this, a story that carried both warning and wonder, both memory and imagination, both history and myth. The Babylonian worldview was deeply structured by cycles. Cycles of the moon, of the planets, of kingship, of ritual. Each year, the Akitu festival renewed the bond between king and god, between city and cosmos. During this festival, processions wound through the streets. Statues of gods were carried out of temples. Chants filled the air, and the king himself was ritually humbled before being restored to his throne. It was a yearly reminder that even the greatest ruler was bound to forces higher than himself. In such a context, the Tower of Babel takes on added layers of meaning. It becomes a structure embodying both human aspiration and divine oversight. At night, the Babylonians turned their gaze upward. From rooftops and towers, they watched the planets wander across the sky, their movements inscribed carefully onto clay. Venus, Mars, Jupiter, too. Each was not only a light, but a sign, its appearance connected to harvests, wars, and fates. Babylonian astronomy was precise enough that it influenced Greek thought centuries later. Their sky watching required high vantage points. And what better platform than the great ziggurat itself, whose summit cleared the dust and haze of the city and offered a clear horizon in every direction. It is easy to imagine a priest astronomer standing at the tower's peak, stylus in hand, recording the movements of a star. Around him, the night hums with silence, broken only by the flicker of oil lamps below. In that stillness, knowledge is born, not in laboratories of stone, but in watchfulness, in patience, in years of gathering patterns. Such knowledge was sacred, for to understand the heavens was to glimpse the order of the gods. Perhaps the Tower of Babel, then, was as much an observatory as a temple, a bridge of learning as well as of prayer. Yet the biblical retelling shifts the emphasis. Instead of celebrating the tower as a place of devotion and knowledge, it frames it as a challenge to divine authority. Why? The answer may lie in exile. For the Israelites held captive in Babylon, the tower was not theirs. It was the monument of their captors, a visible symbol of the empire that had conquered their temple in Jerusalem. To recast it as a story of arrogance punished was to reclaim power through narrative. It was to say that the tower's grandeur was not ultimate, that divine justice could topple even the highest monument. Still, myths rarely erase completely. They transform, they merge, they preserve hidden traces of what came before. The story of Babel may have masked fear and defiance, but it also preserved the memory of a tower so astonishing that it demanded explanation. Even when condemned, it was remembered. Even when ruined, it was retold. And across centuries, that memory continued to spark wonder. To this day, the Tower of Babel stands not in brick, but in imagination, a symbol of unity lost, of knowledge scattered, of ambition punished, of mystery preserved. And whether we see it as myth, as metaphor, or as a hint of something far older, it continues to invite us into silence, to listen, to wonder, to dream of the heights humanity once sought, and perhaps still seeks, in the quiet of the night. Legends of Babel often emphasize the moment of scattering, the sudden unraveling of human unity, the confusion of voices that once spoke as one. But there is another way to see this moment, not as divine punishment, but as a kind of unfolding. When language multiplies, stories multiply. New words give rise to new songs, new ways of naming the world, new poetry, new memory. Perhaps what seemed like division was also creation, the seeding of diversity that allowed civilizations to bloom in different soils, each carrying fragments of the old whole. The Babylonians, for their part, did not speak of scattering as curse, but of destiny. Their myths tell of gods establishing order by separating heavens from earth, light from darkness, waters above from waters below. To separate was to create space, to make room for harmony. In this sense, even the fragmentation of language could be seen as a continuation of cosmic pattern, a scattering that ensured balance rather than chaos. And so the Tower of Babel might symbolize not only a fall from unity, but the necessary branching of human possibility. Still, the image of one voice lingers, the thought of humanity speaking together, working together, moving as one mind and one hand. It carries a strange power, both beautiful and dangerous. In the story of Babel, unity without humility becomes a threat, but unity with wisdom might be a blessing. Perhaps this is why the tale continues to haunt us. It is not only about what was lost, but about what could be regained if unity were tempered by reverence, by respect for limits, by awareness of something larger than ourselves. Archaeologists who uncovered the remains of Babylon marveled at how much still survived in fragments. Tablets preserving the mathematics of the stars, inscriptions recounting kings and conquests, hymns that still sing when translated aloud. Each fragment is like a broken shard of the tower itself, scattered across the earth, carried into distant lands. To study these pieces is to rebuild slowly, carefully, an image of what once was. It is as though the scattering of languages continues, but so does the gathering, piece by piece, voice by voice. The memory of Babel is reconstructed in our own time. The Tower of Babel, then, is not just a monument of the past. It is also a mirror. In it we see both the power of cooperation and the dangers of pride, both the richness of diversity and the longing for unity. Its ruins remind us that what we build may fall, but what we imagine can endure for millennia. The memory of Babel also traveled into art and imagination far beyond Mesopotamia. In the Middle Ages, European painters filled canvases with vast spiraling towers, crowded with workers, cranes, and scaffolding. These images were not faithful reconstructions of Babylonian ziggurats. They were reimaginings. Medieval cathedrals twisted into colossal spirals, testaments to the idea of human ambition stretching toward heaven. To look at them is to feel both awe and unease. For the towers glow with grandeur, yet seem on the verge of collapse. Writers, too, drew upon Babel as metaphor. Philosophers used it to explain the variety of human tongues, poets as a symbol of longing for unity, theologians as a warning against pride. Even scientists have looked at Babel as a mythic way of describing the branching of languages, the divergence of cultures, the scattering of knowledge. In every retelling, the story adapts, reflecting the concerns of the age that tells it. For some, Babel has also hinted at the possibility of forgotten technology. Could a tower truly rise so high that it reached the realm of the gods? Was the scattering of languages an allegory for the collapse of a once global culture? Some fringe theories suggest that ancient civilizations possessed knowledge we cannot fully grasp, that their monuments contain principles of sound, light, or energy now obscured by time. In such views, Babel becomes not just a parable, but a trace of a world where technology and myth were not yet divided. While mainstream historians remain cautious, the fascination persists. The Tower of Babel lives because it sits at the edge of the possible, too extraordinary to dismiss, too mysterious to explain fully. Its very ambiguity is its power. Each generation finds in it what it needs: a moral lesson, a historical puzzle, a symbol of longing, a whisper of lost science. And beneath all of this lies the quiet truth of the earth itself. Bricks crumble, languages change, but the human desire to rise, to connect, to reach beyond, endures. We still build towers, the glass spires that gleam in modern cities, antennas that touch the sky with invisible signals, rockets that carry our machines and our voices beyond the atmosphere. In each of these is an echo of Babel, a continuation of the ancient dream. Perhaps the tower never truly ended. Perhaps we are still building it, in new forms, with new languages, under the same stars. The ziggurat of Babylon, remembered as Etemenanki, was not the only tower of its kind. Across Mesopotamia, other cities raised similar structures. Ur, Uruk, Nippur, and Borsippa each had their own cosmic stairways. Each tower was a local reflection of the same vision, a mountain built in the plains, a tether between the heavens and the earth. Yet the fame of Babylon's tower outshone them all, perhaps because Babylon itself became the center of empire, a city whose power and culture radiated across the known world. Borsippa's ziggurat, known in later tradition as the Tower of Borsippa, was described by travelers as a ruin of enormous scale, leaning and broken, like a giant staircase abandoned mid-construction. Some even confused it with the Tower of Babel itself. So closely did the memory of these towers blend together in legend. The ruins of Borsippa still stand today, a mound of brick that once rose high into the sky, reminding us that the Babel story may be a composite memory of many towers, not just one. Each ziggurat served as more than a temple. They were centers of ritual, astronomy, and administration. From their heights, priests observed the stars, but they also read omens in weather, in flight of birds, in the patterns of smoke. These practices were not mere superstition to the ancients. They were ways of seeing the interconnectedness of all things. For the Babylonians, the cosmos was alive, speaking in signs that could be read if one had patience and wisdom. The tower, then, was a listening post as much as a speaking monument. It was a place where heaven's whispers could be caught and interpreted for the people below. Over time, these towers decayed, as mud brick inevitably does. Floods, fires, and invasions wore them down. Kings restored them, rebuilt them, raised them anew, each claiming to return them to their original form. Yet none could make them eternal. Slowly, they crumbled, and their fragments became part of the villages and fields that surrounded them. Still, their memory remained, too monumental to be forgotten, too strange to be explained away. When the biblical writers told of a tower built to reach the heavens, they were not inventing from nothing. They were echoing a real tradition of towers, a world where such monuments dominated the skyline, visible reminders of humanity's desire to rise. But they were also reshaping that memory, casting it into a story that warned of pride and celebrated divine power. The two layers, history and parable, melded together into the enduring tale we know today. If we close our eyes and imagine the Tower of Babel as it might have been, the image is overwhelming. A vast square base, rising tier upon tier, each platform smaller than the one below, each painted in colors that marked the realms of the cosmos. Stairways ascended along the sides, wide enough for processions, lined with priests, musicians, and offerings. At the summit, a temple gleamed, adorned with bright tiles. Its doors opened to the winds of the heavens. Smoke from incense rose into the sky, mingling with the clouds, carrying prayers upward. From the city below, the tower would have seemed eternal. Its shadow stretched across the streets, its summit often hidden in haze or cloud, a reminder that it touched realms beyond ordinary reach. Festivals wound around it, daily life unfolded in its presence, and even the most ordinary act, drawing water, trading grain, repairing a roof, took place under its gaze. To live in Babylon was to live under the tower's watch. And yet, the story of Babel suggests unease. The people said, "Let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be scattered across the earth." This desire to fix themselves in one place, to anchor identity in a monument, may have been what the tale sought to critique. For history shows that cultures rise and fall, that empires scatter, that no tower can bind humanity forever. The scattering of languages, then, may be less a curse than a reminder that diversity is inevitable, that movement and change are part of the human story. But one cannot dismiss the possibility that the tower also held deeper functions beyond ritual and symbol. Some modern interpreters suggest that its shape, broad base, narrowing summit, terraced design may have amplified sound or energy in ways we only dimly understand. Could it have been a kind of resonator, a structure built to tune itself to the frequencies of earth and sky? Such ideas remain speculative, yet they echo the sense of awe that still surrounds the tower. Whether we see it as myth, as monument, or as machine, the Tower of Babel endures because it represents a threshold. It stands at the border between human aspiration and divine order, between unity and division, between memory and imagination. In that threshold, it continues to call to us, urging us to consider how high we may climb and what we might lose or gain in the attempt. The Babylonians saw themselves as caretakers of order, a people tasked with maintaining the balance between gods and mortals, sky and earth. Their temples and towers were not isolated monuments, but parts of a living system. Canals carried water through the city like veins. Fields produced grain under the rhythms of the moon, and rituals synchronized the pulse of the heavens with the work of human hands. The ziggurat was the heart of this system, a visible anchor of cosmic stability. The architecture itself reflected this worldview. Each terrace was square, aligned with the cardinal directions, so that the tower mirrored the order of the cosmos. North, south, east, west. Each side was associated with elements, planets, and deities. To walk around the tower was to walk the four corners of creation, to move within a symbolic universe expressed in brick and color. At its summit, the temple was called the House of the Link between heaven and earth. In that name alone, the purpose is clear. The ziggurat was not just for reaching heaven, but for binding heaven and earth together. But here lies a paradox. To bind heaven and earth is to invite both harmony and danger. What happens when the link grows too strong? When mortals rise too far? When the sacred order seems threatened? The Tower of Babel story captures this tension perfectly. Humanity builds too high, and the divine intervenes, scattering what was unified. The image lingers because it feels archetypal. Every civilization has dreamed of reaching higher, and every civilization has faced the moment when its ascent is interrupted. Some traditions even suggest that the tower was left unfinished, abandoned midway through construction. This detail resonates with ruins like Borsippa, whose leaning, broken ziggurat seems like a project stopped in time. To see such a ruin is to feel the weight of ambition cut short, of a dream left incomplete. Perhaps this is why the story carried so much symbolic force. An unfinished tower becomes a metaphor for humanity itself, always striving, never complete, always scattering, yet always building anew. The silence of the ruins holds a message. Empires rise, towers crumble, but the desire to build remains eternal. The Tower of Babel is not only about what was lost, but about what endures. The impulse to reach upward, to connect, to imagine beyond the limits of the present. That impulse still lives in us, as powerful now as it was in ancient Babylon. The scattering of Babel is often imagined as a sudden collapse. The voices turned strange, workers confused, the project halted. Yet in reality, scattering is a slow process. woven into migration, trade, and time. People drift outward, carrying their traditions with them, adapting to new lands, shaping new dialects, new customs, new gods. Over centuries, what began as a single community becomes many. In this way, the Babel story may be a poetic compression of a truth about human history, that unity is temporary and scattering inevitable. But the myth adds an intriguing twist. The scattering is framed as divine intervention, as though heaven itself feared what humanity might achieve if left united. Nothing they propose will be impossible for them, the text declares. It is a startling line, suggesting that the builders of Babel were on the verge of something extraordinary. What might this mean? Did the ancients preserve in myth a memory of technologies or insights that we no longer possess? Or is the line a metaphor for the boundless potential of human cooperation, a warning that power without humility is dangerous? Archaeology shows us that Babylon was indeed a place where human ingenuity flourished. Its canals reshaped the land. Its mathematics shaped time. Its astronomy mapped the skies. To the eyes of the ancient world, Babylon's knowledge may have seemed limitless. In this sense, the biblical story could reflect awe as much as criticism, awe that mortals could create something so immense, so enduring, so ambitious that it rivaled the order of the gods. Even today, the scattering continues. Languages shift, cultures branch, ideas diverge. Yet beneath the surface, connections remain. The numbers we use trace back to Babylon. The hours of our day, the arcs of our circles, the divisions of our calendars. All of these carry whispers of Mesopotamian thought. In a way, the tower still stands, not in brick, but in the systems we inherit, the knowledge we preserve. To think of the Tower of Babel as an ancient technology is not to imagine machines of steel, but to see the technology of thought, of organization, of cosmic design. The Babylonians built a structure that embodied their understanding of the universe, a tower that was itself a machine for aligning the human with the divine. Its ruins may have crumbled, but its design still shapes the way we count, measure, and dream. When Alexander the Great entered Babylon in 331 BCE, he found a city still shimmering with ancient prestige. Yet the great ziggurat was already in ruin, its terraces broken, its summit fallen. Ancient sources tell us that Alexander intended to rebuild it, to restore the tower to its full height, perhaps as a symbol that his empire had inherited the mantle of Babylon. He even ordered its remains cleared. But his sudden death in 323 BCE left the project unfinished. The Tower of Heaven remained broken, its glory fading into dust. This moment marks a turning point. The physical tower crumbled, but the legend grew stronger. As Babylon declined, Babel rose in memory, carried by exiles, travelers, priests, and scribes. The biblical story ensured that the tower would never be forgotten, even as its bricks dissolved into the earth. For centuries, the land itself bore silent witness. Mounds rising from the plain, hints of foundations beneath layers of sand, fragments carried away to be reused in village walls. Yet the imagination of humanity kept building the tower in another form, higher and higher, in story and symbol. The myth of Babel touches something timeless, the link between language, unity, and power. To speak with one voice is to wield immense strength. To lose that unity is to lose momentum, to scatter into smaller parts. But perhaps scattering was necessary. Diversity of tongues leads to diversity of thought, of invention, of culture. While unity offers strength, diversity offers resilience. If one path fails, others survive. Perhaps the scattering of Babel, though framed as a curse, was also a gift, a safeguard against the dangers of too much power in one place. Still, the haunting line remains. Nothing they propose will be impossible for them. It suggests that humanity, if left united, could achieve anything. For some, this is metaphorical, a reflection of the potential of cooperation. For others, it is literal, a hint that ancient peoples had reached a level of knowledge now lost, that their monuments were not merely temples, but devices, instruments, technologies cloaked in ritual and myth. Could the Tower of Babel have been one such instrument, its purpose forgotten, its secrets scattered along with the languages of the builders? Whether or not this is true, the fascination persists because the tower stands at a crossroads between memory and imagination. Its ruins are silent, yet its story speaks endlessly. The story of Babel has been told and retold in countless voices, each reshaping its meaning. In Jewish tradition, it became a warning against arrogance, a lesson about the dangers of empire. In Christian thought, it came to symbolize the fragmentation of humanity, a division that could only be healed through divine spirit. In Islamic tradition, the story of a great tower reappeared in echoes, woven into tales of Nimrod and his defiance of heaven. Each culture layered new meanings upon the old ruins, until the tower became less a place than an eternal idea. Meanwhile, the physical remains lay buried. Travelers who passed through the Mesopotamian plains saw great heaps of broken brick, leaning walls, half-buried mounds. Some believed they had found the tower itself. Others confused it with the ziggurat at Borsippa. Local legends wrapped these ruins in mystery, calling them haunted, cursed, or protected by spirits. The ruins became places of wonder and fear, where the past seemed to press against the present. Archaeologists of the 19th century began to bring clarity to the mystery. They uncovered foundations, deciphered inscriptions, and realized that Babylon's ziggurat, Etemenanki, was indeed vast enough to match the biblical description. Its base alone stretched over 90 meters on each side, its height possibly reaching nearly the same. For an ancient world built largely of mud, brick, and stone, this was a mountain of human creation, a marvel that could dominate the horizon. The more scholars uncovered, the more the myth and the monument intertwined, each shedding light on the other. Yet for all that excavation reveals, mystery remains. Bricks can be measured, inscriptions read, but the awe of the ancient builders cannot be fully recaptured. Why did they strive so high? Was it devotion, pride, knowledge? Perhaps all three at once. Human ambition does not fit neatly into categories. The tower may have been a prayer and a machine, a monument of faith and of power, a symbol of unity, and a reminder of division. In this way, the Tower of Babel lives on, not in mud brick, but in the questions it leaves us. Was it myth, memory, or technology, a warning, or a dream? Perhaps it was all of these at once, layered together, like the terraces of the ziggurat itself. To ascend the story is to climb through meanings, one level after another, until at last one reaches the summit and looks out not on a city, but on the endless mystery of the human spirit. The legend of Babel is often read as a tale of hubris. But beneath that surface lies another theme: communication. The scattering of languages is not only the loss of unity, it is also the birth of difference. In difference, creativity blooms. The Babylonians themselves lived at a crossroads of tongues. Akkadian, Sumerian, Aramaic, and many others flowed through their streets. Merchants bargained in multiple dialects. Scribes recorded contracts in different scripts. Priests invoked gods with ancient Sumerian words that were already archaic in their time. Far from a single tongue, Babylon thrived on plurality. This makes the story of Babel even more fascinating. Why tell of a time when language was one? Perhaps because unity of speech symbolized a unity of mind, a harmony now longed for but never fully recovered. Perhaps the story reflects nostalgia for a golden age when understanding flowed without obstacle, when no translation was needed, when the world seemed whole. In this sense, Babel is not only a tale of punishment, but of longing, a memory of something lost, preserved in myth because it was too precious to forget. The scattering of tongues, however, did not silence humanity. Instead, it multiplied song and story. Each new language birthed its own myths, its own poetry, its own rhythms of thought. The diversity of human culture may be the true legacy of Babel. Not confusion, but abundance. Yet the dream of unity remains, echoing in projects to translate, to bridge, to connect once more. From the scribes who sought to compile lexicons in ancient Mesopotamia, to the modern technologies that allow voices to cross oceans instantly, the longing for one voice has never left us. The tower itself, in this light, becomes a symbol not of arrogance, but of communication. It was a gathering place, a central monument around which the life of the city turned. People came together there for ritual, for festival, for observation of the stars. It united heaven and earth, God and mortal, city and cosmos. In the story, it is destroyed not by stone crumbling, but by voices breaking. The physical tower fades, but the true collapse lies in language. And so, when we think of Babel, we might imagine not only bricks, but words, not only height, but speech. The tower rises in language itself, a monument of voices striving to reach beyond silence. To scatter the languages is to scatter the tower. Yet in every word we speak, in every story we tell, pieces of it are rebuilt again. The fascination with Babel did not end with scripture. In later centuries, mystics and scholars returned to the story, seeing in it hidden meanings. Some saw the scattering of languages as a fall from divine truth, a breaking of a perfect tongue in which the names of things once reflected their essence. To recover that lost language became a dream for many, a belief that somewhere, hidden beneath human speech, lay the primal voice of creation itself. In the Renaissance, philosophers searched for a universal language, a way to restore the unity of Babel. They devised symbolic alphabets, mathematical codes, and elaborate systems meant to mirror the logic of nature. None endured, yet the effort itself reveals the depth of longing for what was imagined lost. Even today, projects in science and technology, whether through artificial intelligence, digital code, or global communication networks, echo the same dream: to overcome the scattering, to rebuild the tower of understanding. But if the scattering of languages was also the scattering of knowledge, then perhaps the fragments of Babel still lie all around us. Every culture carries a shard of the old whole, A piece of astronomy here, a fragment of mathematics there, a myth, a ritual, a way of seeing the cosmos. To bring these fragments together is to rebuild, not in brick, but in wisdom. Archaeology, linguistics, history, philosophy, all are attempts to gather the scattered voices, to listen for the harmony that might once have been. The Babylonians themselves seemed to understand this. Their scribes copied and recopied texts, preserving words in languages that were already ancient to them. They built libraries of clay, archives of memory, treasuries of signs. They knew that words could crumble like brick if left uncared for, and so they pressed them into clay, fired them in kilns, made them durable against time. In doing so, they passed fragments of Babel to us, fragments we can still read and hear today. Perhaps then, the Tower of Babel was never entirely lost. Its ruins lie in the ground, yes, but also in our calendars, in our mathematics, in the very way we measure time and space. Its story lies in scripture and legend, in art and philosophy, and its dream lies in us still, the dream of unity, of knowledge whole, of voices joined in a song that does not erase difference, but carries it upward into harmony. To understand the Tower of Babel fully, we must also understand the city that held it. Babylon was not only a place of ritual, but of daily life. Artisans shaping clay into pots, scribes impressing contracts onto tablets, farmers bringing grain into the city, traders arriving with lapis, cedar, and spices, the hum of the marketplace mixed with the chants of the temples. Music floated from harps and drums. Storytellers recited epics. Children played in courtyards. All of this unfolded beneath the shadow of the great ziggurat. The tower was not separate from life. It was life's backdrop, the constant reminder that the divine was near. The Babylonians lived in cycles of time marked by the heavens. Their lunar calendar structured rituals. Their observations of Venus and Jupiter timed harvests and decisions of state. Even the geometry of the tower may have been a reflection of these cycles. 7 terraces for 7 celestial wanderers, colors corresponding to planets, alignments matching the solstices and equinoxes. If this is true, then the tower was a cosmic clock, as well as a sacred mountain, keeping the rhythm of the universe in step with the city. But the story of Babel also reminds us that monuments cannot preserve eternity. Empires fade, walls crumble, towers fall. Yet memory outlasts stone. What we inherit from Babylon is not only ruins, but knowledge, systems of time, measures of space, languages that echo still. The bricks may be gone, but the patterns endure. Perhaps this is why the story of Babel resonates so deeply. But it reminds us that what is scattered is not lost, that fragments can become seeds for new beginnings. In this way, Babel can be seen not as the end of unity, but as the beginning of diversity. What was once one tongue became many songs. What was once one city became many cultures. The scattering was not only a curse but a release, a spreading outward that allowed humanity to flourish in countless forms. Diversity, after all, is the true wealth of our species, the many ways of seeing, speaking, dreaming, and building. The tower's shadow may have seemed eternal in its time, but today it is the story that endures, reminding us that ambition, unity, division, and diversity are all woven into the human journey. When the ruins of Babylon were uncovered, archaeologists were struck by the scale of the city. Massive walls, broad streets, palaces adorned with bright tiles, and fragments of the great tower itself revealed a civilization of astonishing ambition. Inscriptions by Nebuchadnezzar II boast of rebuilding the ziggurat to reach as high as the heavens. The king describes laying its foundation deep into the earth, making its summit pierce the skies. The words echo with pride, but also with devotion, for he framed his work as service to Marduk, the supreme deity of Babylon. It is striking how closely these inscriptions match the language of the biblical story. "Let us build a tower with its top in the heavens," the people of Babel say. "I raised its head to the sky," Nebuchadnezzar declares. The parallel is uncanny, as if the biblical tale was a direct response to Babylon's own proclamations. For the exiles in Babylon, the tower was not just a building, it was a symbol of empire, a reminder of conquest. To reinterpret it as arrogance punished was to strip it of its power and recast it as folly. Yet even stripped of grandeur, the tower endured. Its ruins became a puzzle, its story a lesson, its shadow a source of awe. And over time, it became more than Babylon. It became a symbol for all human ambition, for every attempt to rise beyond limits, for every dream that sought to unite heaven and earth. Artists painted it as spiraling into the clouds. Writers used it as a metaphor for human striving. Scholars debated its meaning. The tower became timeless, not bound to its original bricks, but reborn in every retelling. Some theories suggest that the ziggurat may have been used for astronomical purposes, its terraces serving as stages for observation. Others imagine it as a power center of a different kind, a monument built to harness resonance between earth and sky. Whatever its function, it clearly commanded reverence. It was not only a building, it was a statement of human capacity. And so, the Tower of Babel lingers at the edge of imagination. Its ruins tell us of mud brick and labor. Its myth tells us of pride and scattering. Its symbol tells us of unity and loss, of ambition and humility. In all these ways, it endures, whispering that the human story is always both reaching and falling, always building and scattering, always dreaming and remembering. The image of the Tower of Babel has endured for so long because it rests on a universal theme: the desire to rise. Human beings have always looked upward, toward mountains, stars, clouds, and heavens, and have always longed to ascend. In lands without natural peaks, people built them: step pyramids, mounds, towers, spires. Each culture shaped the idea in its own way, yet the impulse is the same. To rise is to reach, to connect, to extend beyond the ordinary. For the Babylonians, the tower was a mountain of meaning. Its terraces were not simply levels of stone, but thresholds of the cosmos. To climb was to pass through creation, to touch the realms of the gods. In this way, the tower was both physical and symbolic, a stairway and a story at once. The biblical retelling reimagines this ascent as arrogance, but perhaps the truth lies in between. To rise can be both devotion and pride, both prayer and defiance. It depends on the spirit in which the ascent is made. The scattering of languages is what arrests the climb. The tower does not fall from storm or earthquake, it collapses in sound. The workers cannot understand each other. Their speech dissolves into confusion, and unity breaks. The story suggests that speech itself is the true mortar of human achievement. Bricks and tar hold structure together, but words hold people together. Without shared words, the tower becomes impossible. This insight feels timeless. Even today, misunderstanding fractures projects. Mistranslation creates distance. Miscommunication leads to conflict. The story of Babel may remind us that unity requires more than bricks. It requires listening, patience, and the effort to bridge difference. To rebuild Babel, in any form, is to rebuild communication. Perhaps that is why the story has never lost its power. It is not only about the past, but about every moment when voices fail and cooperation breaks. And it is also about every moment when voices join again, when language becomes bridge instead of wall. Babel falls, but it also rises endlessly. In every effort of humans to speak, to share, to understand. As centuries passed, the ruins of Babylon became overgrown, their bricks reused, their walls eroded by wind and flood. Yet the story of the tower never faded. Pilgrims spoke of it, scholars debated it, artists imagined it anew. The ruins became a place where history and myth merged, where each traveler added a layer of interpretation. Some described the mound as cursed, others as sacred. Some linked it to Nimrod, others to forgotten gods. Each telling reshaped the memory, just as each brick once reshaped the tower itself. In the modern era, archaeology sought to separate fact from legend. Excavations revealed the foundations of Etemenanki, inscriptions that spoke of Nebuchadnezzar's ambition, and tablets that recorded the rhythms of Babylonian life. Slowly, a clearer picture emerged. The tower was real, vast, and sacred. Yet even with facts in hand, the mystery remained. Facts explain the structure, but not the feeling. They measure bricks, but not awe. They map foundations, but not the dreams that built them. And perhaps that is fitting, for the Tower of Babel has always been more than its physical form. It is the story that gives it life, the tale of unity broken, of voices scattered, of ambition halted. It is the myth that transformed a ruin into a symbol, a monument of imagination that outlasted the bricks themselves. The story endures because it speaks not only of Babylon, but of humanity as a whole. Even today, in the spires of modern cities, in the towers of steel and glass that rise into the sky, the echo of Babel remains. Each skyscraper is a new attempt to climb, to extend beyond the ground, to touch the heavens with human craft. We rise higher than the ancients ever dreamed, yet the same questions remain. Will our towers endure? Will our unity hold? Or will misunderstanding scatter us once more? The Tower of Babel invites us to reflect on these questions. It is both warning and wonder, both memory and prophecy. It is a tower that still rises within us. Each time we build, each time we speak, each time we dream of reaching beyond the horizon of our world. The deeper we look at the story of Babel, the more it feels like a layered text, part memory, part metaphor, part mystery. On one level, it is the story of a monument, a tower that rose in the heart of Mesopotamia. On another, it is a parable about pride, about the limits of human ambition. And on yet another, it is a meditation on communication, on the way language shapes our ability to build, to cooperate, to dream together. Each level rises like a terrace of the ziggurat itself, carrying us higher into meaning. For the Babylonians, building was never just practical. Architecture was ritual, aligned with the heavens, infused with sacred names and numbers. Each brick laid was a prayer, each terrace an offering. To them, the tower was not rebellion but devotion, not arrogance but alignment. To others, it became arrogance incarnate. How the story is told depends on where one stands, whether at the base of the tower looking upward in awe, or in exile beneath its shadow, looking upon it as a symbol of oppression. The same monument can be sacred mountain or cursed tower, depending on the eyes that behold it. The scattering of languages adds another dimension. It suggests that the true tower of humanity is built not only of stone, but of words. Language is what allows us to build together, to share ideas, to pass on knowledge. To lose unity of speech is to lose the ability to build as one. The story preserves this insight in mythic form, showing how fragile cooperation is when words falter. Perhaps this is why Babel remains so haunting, because we still wrestle with misunderstanding, still struggle to bridge the gaps between our voices. And yet, the scattering also enriched the human story. Languages multiplied, stories diversified, cultures blossomed in different soils. What was lost in unity was gained in variety. The curse became gift, the fall became flourishing. This paradox is the heart of Babel. Unity and division, gain and loss, pride and humility, all bound together in a single tale. When we think of the Tower of Babel today, we think of a structure that is gone. But in truth, it survives. In every language spoken, in every story told, in every tower that rises against the sky, it endures as both ruin and dream, as both memory and possibility. The ruins of Babylon still whisper in the desert winds. Sand covers foundations, bricks crumble, and yet the outlines remain. Silent testimony to an age when human ambition sought to touch the heavens. Standing among the ruins, one feels both the presence of what was and the absence of what has vanished. It is a place of thresholds, between memory and forgetting, between myth and history, between dust and eternity. Archaeologists who uncovered the site of Etemenanki were struck not only by its scale, but by its precision. The base stretched outward in a perfect square, its alignment with the cardinal directions exact. The inscriptions left by Nebuchadnezzar speak of restoration, of raising its summit to the sky, of honoring the god Marduk. These words are not only boasts, but prayers. A king's devotion pressed into brick, a legacy meant to endure. Yet even the greatest kings could not keep the tower standing forever. Time wore it down, leaving only fragments and story. The biblical writers transformed those fragments into a myth of scattering. But the ruins themselves whisper something different. They tell of laborers mixing clay, of reed mats layered for strength, of fires hardening bricks, of thousands of hands building in rhythm. They tell of priests climbing terraces, of astronomers watching stars, of chants echoing in the night. They tell of a city that rose and fell, but whose dream of ascent never died. Perhaps this is why the Tower of Babel continues to call to us. It is not only the story of the past, but a mirror of our present and a prophecy of our future. We too build towers of stone, of steel, of knowledge, of communication. We too gather languages, scatter, and seek to reunite. The tower rises in new forms, and the same questions remain. How high can we build? How far can we reach? And what happens when our voices falter? The ruins lie quiet, but the dream they once held rises endlessly. The Tower of Babel endures not because of what it was, but because of what it means. It is a monument of imagination, an eternal reminder that humanity is both builder and scatterer, both dreamer and exile, always reaching, always remembering. In the quiet of night, when the desert winds move softly across the ruins, one can almost imagine the tower rising again, terrace upon terrace gleaming under starlight, stairways alive with flickering torches, chants spiraling upward like smoke. The ziggurat becomes more than memory. It becomes a living presence, carried in imagination across the centuries. Perhaps this is why the story of Babel has never faded. It is not only about what was built, but about what was dreamed. The dream of ascent has always been part of the human spirit. From the first huts of reeds to the pyramids of Egypt, from cathedrals that stretch heavenward to rockets that pierce the atmosphere, we have sought to rise. The Tower of Babel is one of the earliest stories that captures this longing. It tells us that the desire to ascend is ancient, that it has always carried both promise and peril. To rise is to seek the divine, but to rise too far without humility is to risk falling. For the Babylonians, the tower was not a challenge to heaven, but a bridge. Its name, Etemenanki, the foundation of heaven and earth, reflects this purpose. It was meant to unite, not to divide. Yet the story that survives is one of division. Perhaps the truth is that both meanings are true. Every tower, every great work of humanity, unites and divides at once. It gathers people, but it also reveals differences. It inspires wonder, but it also awakens fear. Babel is the symbol of this paradox. The scattering of languages ensures that no single voice dominates forever. It protects against arrogance, but it also creates longing. The longing to understand one another again, to recover unity without losing diversity. This longing is itself a kind of tower, built not of brick but of intention, rising each time we translate, listen, or reach across boundaries. The ruins remind us that nothing made of clay endures forever, yet stories endure because they live in us. The Tower of Babel is rebuilt every time we remember it, every time we speak of it, every time we gaze upward and wonder what lies beyond our reach. As we move deeper into the mystery of Babel, we see how it has become more than a story of ancient Mesopotamia. It has become a story of humanity as a whole. In the biblical text, the tower is halted by divine decree, but in history, humanity never stopped building. We scattered, but we also carried fragments of knowledge, fragments of ambition. Across continents, new towers rose. The pyramids in Mesoamerica, stone temples in India, spires in Europe, skyscrapers in modern cities. In each, the echo of Babel resounds. The myth is not only about pride, but about possibility. Nothing they propose will be impossible for them, says the text, as if acknowledging the extraordinary capacity of human cooperation. Even in scattering, that capacity did not vanish. It was dispersed, diversified, transformed. The tower lives not in one monument, but in the collective works of countless cultures. In this sense, Babel did not fall, but it multiplied. Some modern thinkers view the story as a metaphor for technology itself. Technology unites us, but it also divides. It gives us power, but also carries risk. It allows us to rise, but forces us to ask how high we should climb. The Tower of Babel can be seen as the first parable of technological ambition, a reminder that power without wisdom can scatter rather than unite. Yet it also suggests that ambition is inevitable. that the desire to rise cannot be silenced. Standing among the ruins of Babylon, one feels this tension. The bricks speak of labor, devotion, and vision, but the silence speaks of impermanence. Towers crumble, but the longing to ascend does not. Perhaps this is the true meaning of Babel, that humanity is always in motion between unity and scattering, between building and ruin, between memory and dream. The tower stands not in brick but in imagination, rising each time we look upward, each time we listen to the voices of the past, each time we wonder whether the heavens are closer than they seem. The Tower of Babel has endured across ages not because of its bricks, but because of its questions. It asks us, how high should we build? How much knowledge should we seek? What binds us together, and what scatters us apart? These questions echo as strongly now as they did in the plains of Mesopotamia thousands of years ago. When we picture the ziggurat of Babylon, we see more than a building. We see the hopes of a people who believed that the world was alive with meaning, that gods could be reached, that the stars were messages waiting to be read. We also see the fears of those who watched such power and wondered if it went too far. We see the awe of travelers who marveled at its height, and the suspicion of exiles who saw in it the arrogance of empire. The tower contains all of these voices, layered like its terraces, rising one upon another. Perhaps this is why it became a story, rather than just a ruin. Ruins fade, stories endure. The Tower of Babel rose in brick, but it rose even higher in memory. It became a symbol of human ambition and divine boundary, of unity and division, of pride and humility. And in that symbol, it continues to live. Today, when we build skyscrapers that pierce the clouds, or launch rockets that ascend beyond the atmosphere, the shadow of Babel lingers. We are still reaching, still climbing, still seeking the heavens. And the same questions remain. Will we build wisely, or will we scatter? Will our towers unite us, or divide us? Will our ascent be harmony, or hubris? The story does not answer these questions. It only leaves them for us, as open as the sky above the ruins of Babylon. In the end, the Tower of Babel is not only about the past, but it is about us. It is about the human spirit, forever restless, forever yearning, forever seeking to rise. It is about the fragility of unity, the power of language, the dangers of pride, and the beauty of diversity. It is about the mystery of memory, the blending of myth and history, the way ruins become symbols, and the way symbols become mirrors. Whether the tower was simply a ziggurat of mud brick, a cosmic observatory, or something more mysterious, an ancient technology whose purpose is now forgotten, it remains one of the most enduring images in the human imagination. It tells us that we are builders, but also scatterers, dreamers, but also exiles. It tells us that we rise, we fall, and we rise again. Perhaps the true tower is not of stone at all, but of words, of stories, myths, songs, and languages, each one a brick in the great monument of human culture. Scattered though they are, they form together a structure that still reaches upward, still touches the heavens in its own way. Every voice adds a terrace, every story a stair, every song a shrine. The tower continues, not in Babylon, but in us. So the Tower of Babel endures, as ruin, as story, as symbol, as dream. It endures because it carries the eternal rhythm of humanity, building, scattering, remembering, and building again. It is a tale that cradles us like the desert night, whispering of what was, what is, and what might yet be. And as we close our eyes, the tower rises once more in imagination, its terraces glowing beneath the stars, its summit lost in cloud, its meaning stretching endlessly beyond our grasp. And so the Tower of Babel stands, not in brick, but in imagination. Its terraces have crumbled, its summit has vanished, yet its story endures, a symbol of unity and scattering, of ambition and humility, of memory and mystery. The ruins lie silent beneath desert sands, but the dream they carried still rises within us. Each time we build, each time we speak, each time we wonder at the stars, the tower lives again. Perhaps its true form was never just clay and bitumen, but the eternal rhythm of humanity itself, always reaching, always scattering, always remembering. As we leave the story of Babel behind, let its whispers stay with you, gentle reminders of the heights we seek and the questions that guide us. May its quiet strength ease you into rest, and may the tower rise again, softly, in your dreams.